Patriots podcast. We are very pleased to welcome in Greg Cosell. Everybody knows him, over 40 years in NFL films, the guru over there. He's the matchup show. You know, he's seen it all. He's done it all. And in fact, he's been one of my mentors over the years. He's welcomed me into NFL films to watch different film with different people. I think he's one of the most knowledgeable people around the NFL in terms of film. And I love the way he analyzes things. And in fact, listening to him sort of recenters me in terms of I need to look at things a little bit more at a distance. Greg, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Greg, it's my pleasure. It's been a while, my friend.
It has been a while. But I wanted to get you in on this, and you're actually the first outside guest that I've had on my podcast. And, you know, obviously the Patriots are at a weird time in their existence, at least since Bill Belichick has been there with Tom Brady gone and what they went through last year with Cam Newton. So they are obviously looking for their next quarterback, and that could go in a variety of different ways. And I wanted to have you on just to get sort of your opinion, what you've seen, how you think things fit with the Patriots in terms of guys that are available right now, veterans, and also some of the draftable quarterbacks. So, but first I want to start with, let's go back to this past season. I don't know how much you watched the Patriots, considering they fell off a map there.
I've watched them quite a bit.
Okay. So I just wanted to get your general impressions of the Patriots offense, first year without Tom Brady, Cam Newton in there. Just what did you see? What did you think of Cam's fit? And why did you think things didn't go great for the Patriots offense last year?
You know, the best way I can answer that is just with what the film showed, because I don't know, Greg, as you know, the motivation. You know, I'm certainly not there. I don't know what's in Bill Belichick's head. But they played as if they did not want the passing game to be a big factor in their offense. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that's Cam Newton. Like I said, I don't know the reasoning behind it. But we know in a league in which the passing game is clearly more predominant, with the exception of maybe two or three teams, more predominant than the running game, and clearly more so that the Patriots were not one of those teams. There were numerous games that I watched on tape where I felt, watching the tape, that they don't really want to throw the ball very much. So again, I can't speak to the reason why, but we know in today's NFL, it's hard to win and put up a lot of points playing that way.
And no question. One thing I wanted to know, I certainly have my opinion from watching them over the years, and no one expected Cam Newton to come in and beat Tom Brady at the line of scrimmage before the snap. But how did it appear to you that the Patriots were limited in what they did as far as checks, audibles, things like that we would have seen them do in the past?
I would say that's fair. You know, it's always hard to know. So many people, as you know, on Twitter, social media, think they know what a quarterback's doing at the line of scrimmage. I'm not that smart, Greg. I don't know what the quarterback's doing at the line of scrimmage just because I hear him yell out a few words. So, you know, it appeared to be the case that they did less at the line of scrimmage, because certainly one of the things that has made Tom Brady great, and there's obviously many things, but one of the things that I always thought made him great was he won a large percentage of the downs before the ball was snapped. I never got the sense that that was Cam Newton's game, even in Carolina, which doesn't mean he never did that. Of course, every quarterback does that to some degree. But I thought that that was one of the key components of Tom Brady's game. So my sense is they did not do quite as much of that this year. But then again, I don't think their offense had as many elements to it, which goes back to my initial point. I can't speak to why that was the case, but it didn't strike me that it had as many elements to it.
When Cam did throw the ball, or when he went back to pass, how did you think he did as a whole on the season, as far as, making the right read, and also, just the way he threw the ball?
I think he was pretty much the Cam that he's always been. I think he's always been a little bit erratic. I think he's streaky. I think he'll miss throws that are relatively routine that he should make, and then make some throws and you go, wow, that guy can really throw it. I think that's the way he's been much of his career. He's always had some scattershot tendencies, and he'll miss some. So I think that he was really no different this year than he has been in previous years. He obviously threw the ball less than he had in previous years, with the exception of a couple of games. It was not an offense, other than the running part of it, it was not really an offense built around him throwing the football.
Yeah. And how did you, just real quick, how did you think he looked as a runner compared to, say, years past in Carolina?
Relatively the same. I mean, he was never, because he's so big.
Yeah.
I never viewed him as explosive the way you think of a Michael Vick, a Lamar Jackson. He doesn't,
Right.
He doesn't move like that just because he's 6'5", 260 pounds. So I sensed that he ran pretty much the same. I mean, they used him a lot in that regard. I don't know what his number of carries were, but there were a lot of design runs in their offense.
Yeah. And one more thing on Cam, and I've talked to people around the Patriots, and trust me when I say this, that probably the chances are pretty good that Cam is back next year, because of Bill's relationship with him. I think also how he appeals to other players helps them maybe sell the program a little bit, which is causing some Patriots fans to go jump off the Zachem Bridge. Just your general opinion on if Cam is back and they are going to be aggressive at wide receiver, getting better at tight end, upgrading the weaponry. Belichick knows that they can't go on with what they had the past 2 years. They can't. If Cam is back as a quarterback and he has to play with an upgraded weapons, do you think that they could be better as a whole on offense with a year or two of Cam?
I would say they'll be better. I can't sit here and say they'd be great. Clearly, based on what you said, and I know you have connections within the building, they probably did not throw the ball as much because they did not feel they had the personnel on the perimeter and a tight end. Clearly, tight end too. I don't know what they think of the UCLA kid, Asiasi, I believe, and I liked him coming out. So I don't know what they see him down the road, because I think he's a pretty athletic kid. So I don't know if they think, hey, he takes a step in his second year, or whether they still need to address the tight end position significantly. But they're going to have to throw the ball more, and throwing it more means they're going to have to throw it better. If they believe that Cam is the guy to do that, which it sounds like from what you're saying they do, then they clearly need upgrades at wide receivers. Look, wide receivers, Greg, almost every year now, going back quite a number of years, wide receiver and corner by extension are the two positions in which the most players are drafted in every NFL draft, because they're so important in the NFL. It's very, very difficult to play in today's NFL if you can't throw the football. And say what you want about Cam, he's obviously had great years in this league. He was an MVP, got a team to a Super Bowl, and has had a number of great years, but he's not, even at his best, a precision passer. He's not the kind of guy that just sticks it right on receivers' hands and and makes them better per se. I hate to be cliched, but you know what I mean. Yeah. He needs weaponry.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a quick aside to let you know on Asiasi, I think they like him as an athlete, and he showed up fast in training camp. But then the way it was put to me was, look, the NFL can be tough to play in. And some guys, like guys who were at Michigan, it got a little tough and he transferred to UCLA, which was a little bit easier. You're basically put to a moment where either you push through and embrace how tough the NFL is, especially a team like the Patriots.
And he probably did, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You sort of take a step back. And he took a step back.
I don't know the kid. I'm just sitting watching tape, and he had very good athletic traits. I thought he could be a good player. Obviously, in any NFL city, more so maybe than any with Bill Belichick, if you can't push through, you're going to have a tough time. And we'll see how he responds from year one to year two.
Yep, absolutely. I think he's going to be put to the test early, and they're hoping he hits because they need him. Let's go through some of the veteran options that'll probably come via trade, what have you. I think I have one free agent on here that could be available. And I'm just curious on because a lot of these guys I haven't watched a ton of. And I'm just curious how you think they would do in the Patriots system with an increased role. And number one is Gardner Minshew from the Jaguars.
Yeah, I always liked Minshew. obviously, coming off 2019, I thought he could be a starter in the NFL. Now, by saying that, I didn't mean he'd be a top 3 or a top 5 player,
Right.
a certain kind of player. If you had a nice running game, a running game that was meaningful, not a running game that was an aside, but a run game that was a factor every week and somewhat of a foundation. And you had some good weapons, which, I thought Jacksonville had, but it obviously didn't work out. Their offensive line wasn't particularly good. You need that as well. I think Minshew can line up and play. I mean, I thought Minshew could line up and play in the same way that Kirk Cousins can line up and play.
Yep.
And people can say what they want about Kirk Cousins, and maybe he's not a Super Bowl winner. We don't know any of that. But, a guy throws 30 touchdowns every year and, about 10 interceptions, and you can line up and play with Kirk Cousins. I thought Minshew could be that guy. Obviously, things went south in Jacksonville. But I think in the right scenario, with weapons and a back, and by the way, I really like Damian Harris, just as an
so
aside.
do I.
I really like him. I think he's their better runner than Michelle, but that's my pointless point of view, as Billy Joel once said. Anyway, I think Minshew can line up and play with weapons, and obviously you need enough of a defense because you can't ask Minshew to have to put up 30 every week.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 2 on my list, and if this guy comes available, it means that 2 teams have taken long looks at him and decided he is not starter caliber for them, or at least at any time in the future. And look, let's be honest. He's had a really rough go with a lot of OCs and play callers and things like that. And that's Marcus Mariota.
Yeah. I'm not sure about Marcus Mariota. I don't know how well he throws it. And when I say I don't know, it's not that I don't have an answer. I mean, from studying tape, I'm not sure if he's really a good enough thrower overall. He obviously has mobility. You can have the design run game. He can make second reaction plays with his legs, clearly. I don't feel real good about him in an offense that probably requires a lot of work. And this has nothing, I don't want people to think I'm saying he's not smart. It has nothing to do with that. I just don't know if he's a good enough thrower to make all the throws with the consistency that you need.
Yep. And I tend to agree with you. A guy that we've seen up close here for a couple years, who could become available. I doubt they would trade him to the Patriots, but you never know. Sam Darnold with the Jets if they go quarterback at number 2.
Yeah. Darnold's a fascinating guy. I had some concerns based on his college tape when I did him coming out of USC. I thought there was a little bit of a reckless, undisciplined nature to his play. I thought he had poor lower body mechanics. I thought that led to him being inaccurate, poor ball placement on routine throws. And it's always easy to talk about the supporting cast. We just did that with the Patriots, and there's no question supporting casts matter. But one thing I learned, and I learned this from Bill Walsh, who I was fortunate to know, that when you evaluate a quarterback, you have to isolate the quarterback. And I think that Sam Darnold needs work. Now, having said that, I think he's talented. I think he throws the ball well. He's obviously got movement. He can make plays on the move. Then it depends on how important you think that trade is in today's NFL. And we can probably get to that with a couple of quarterbacks coming out in this draft. But I think Darnold has talent and traits to work with, but I think he needs work.
Yeah. And the fun guy, because I don't think we need to get into Jimmy Garoppolo because we know he fits in the scheme, and the Patriots would like to have him back if the 49ers upgrade at quarterback. And that's Andy Dalton. What did you think of him in Dallas when he played this year? And does he still have the ability to, lead a hopefully more talented team and a better coaching staff?
Yeah, I was a little disappointed. I thought he had some moments, but I also thought he was really more inconsistent and erratic than I thought he would be. Because I thought, again, I really like Dak Prescott, and I thought when he got hurt, I didn't think Dalton would do the same thing, but I thought he would come in and that their offense in relative terms, wouldn't miss a beat. You know, not that he would throw for 450 yards. That's not my point. But they still have a relatively efficient passing game. They have 3 quality wideouts. I thought their offense and their pass game would still be pretty solid. It was very inconsistent. So I was a little disappointed with Andy Dalton this year. So again, you raised the point, you know, if he came to New England, because he can play in this league. We know he can. He was on his way to being an MVP a number of years ago, and he did have good years in Cincinnati. And I think he made the playoffs something like 6 years in a row. Did he not? I forget the number. Yeah. He won games. For those who believe it's just the quarterback that wins games in the NFL, but the Bengals won games with Andy Dalton at quarterback. So I was a little disappointed overall. So I don't know where he stands in his career right now.
Yeah. Interesting. So let's go into some of the draft guys right now, and we won't really touch on Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson, who I heard you on Ross Tucker's podcast. Your, weekly appearances are appointment listening for me, and you're very high on those 2 guys. I'm more curious. We'll get into some of the depth in this quarterback class, and somebody who I trust has told me that the Patriots like the depth in this class, and I'll be interested to see who might pop for you there. But Mac Jones out of Alabama, obviously the Nick Saban connection,
right?
Has a lot of people curious. What do you think of Mac?
I think Mac Jones is. You have to answer this question to determine what your view is of Mac Jones. Okay, and I think different people, and I've talked to some, not with the Patriots, obviously, just coaches, people along those lines. Mm-hmm. You have to answer this question. Do you view movement ability, second reaction ability as a required trait now to play quarterback in the league? Let's put Tom Brady aside. Mm-hmm. He's the greatest of all time. Okay, unless you believe Mac Jones is Tom Brady, and I don't say that in a sarcastic manner, unless you believe he's going to be that guy. If you don't believe he's that level of player, then your view about mobility and second reaction improvisation will factor greatly into your worldview of Mac Jones, because he's not a good athlete, he's not big, and he does not have second reaction ability. And he's not a big arm guy. Now, he can make all the throws in the context of specific offenses, but he's not a big arm guy. So you have to decide how important second reaction ability is to you. I've had many coaches tell me now that they view it as critical. I had a GM who you and I both respect tremendously say that you'd like to have it, but he doesn't view it as essential. So it comes down to what your worldview of that is. I vacillate because I'm old school, Greg, because I'm old. So I vacillate, but if you believe second reaction ability is critical and you have to have it, then Mac Jones is not a first round pick because he does not have it and he's not a good athlete.
I'm just curious, to get a sort of put this in context. So if I say like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, where do you put them in terms of movement ability and second reaction throws, just to get a context for Max?
They have it. Burrow is really light on his feet, a really good athlete. And Herbert's 6'6", 240. Jones is 6'2", 217 with not a great body. And see, that would concern me a little bit too, only for this reason. And I don't know Mac Jones, and you hear, his teammates love him and all, you got to be careful about that. Not that they don't love him. That's not my point. Mm-hmm. But you got to be careful about the love, because I remember reading Bruce Arians' book, I think was The Quarterback Whisperer. You probably read it as well. Yep. And he talked about Kelly Holcomb, and how he was awesome and just everything you want in a quarterback. And, and I don't know Kelly Holcomb, but obviously we know Kelly Holcomb was pretty much a journeyman. Just because guys love you and you have, a great attitude, that doesn't make you a great quarterback. No one's a great quarterback because they take their offensive line out to dinner on Thursday nights. That's not why guys are great quarterbacks. So my guess is Mac Jones, from everything I've read, is an amazing kid. So let's put that aside. But Herbert and Burrow are high-level athletes, and Herbert's 6'6", 240. So I think that those two guys in comparison to Mac Jones, I don't think that those are valid comparisons.
Okay. Next up, Justin Fields, who, if I remember correctly, I think you had some concerns about after watching the film on him.
Yeah. And you got to be careful about those concerns too, because I had concerns about Justin Herbert, and those concerns did not show up this past year. Mm-hmm. So he's a high-level traits guy. Big arm, highly athletic, solidly built, can make all the throws, tough, competitive. I think if you look at the traits, you say, wow. But I think he was a little deliberate in a lot of things he did, which you could probably say the same about Herbert coming out of Oregon. So I think it becomes a projection in how you see what you can do with him. So I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, I would never draft him. I think the term I used was that he scares me a little, but that doesn't mean that he can't play, or that if he's coached well and worked through, that he couldn't develop into a really good player. But I think you have to be aware of what the tape shows, particularly this year where there's no combine. I'm sure teams will, obviously being a quarterback, teams will have private workouts with him. And I don't know what the rules are going to be, so you may know that more than I. Yeah. But, you're going to have to do your research. I've heard nothing that indicates that he's a bad kid or anything. That's not what I'm speaking about. So I think, there'd be some things that concern you on the tape, and then you have to make that projection. Now, as you and I both know, quarterbacks that have great movement ability, they can often compensate and camouflage for some of their weaknesses as they develop. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with your points on that. And also that, these movement type quarterbacks, like you talked about, it's the projection. Like, when is it going to click for them? Sort of like the upper level, passing traits that you're going to pick up in the NFL. Are they ever going to pick it up? I mean, look at Josh Allen. All of a sudden, year 3, he takes off, and you watch him doing all this stuff pre-snap and anticipation throws and all this stuff. Where 2 years ago, you were like, no chance.
And when he came out, look, you remember when he came out, because the tape told you this. It wasn't, it's easy to say, oh, everybody was wrong about Josh. Right. And no one's wrong, because you're watching the tape, and the tape tells you that, hey, this is what he's struggling with. Obviously, if he improves in those areas, and his accuracy and ball placement, and I can't remember in all my years, I just finished my 41st season. In all my years, I don't remember a guy whose ball placement improved so dramatically. Mm-hmm. You can't, for the people who loved him, they say, oh, see, I told you so. It's not, I told you so, or you're wrong. It's, here's what the tape shows, and can he improve? Guys do get coached too, Greg, as you know. I mean, that's what happens. It is a coach's job to run a good system, to coach the quarterback, to ideally present, particularly in normal down and distance situations where the defense doesn't have the tactical advantage, to present really well-designed route concepts and define reads and define throws for the quarterback. That's what coaching is. That's the job of the coach. So, when you watch Buffalo's offense, and I really like a lot of the things Brian Daboll did, as I'm sure you did, you see some really nice things that defined it nicely for Josh Allen.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, this next guy might need some of that. Another small school guy like Josh Allen, Trey Lance. Who I have not watched played. I think he's played like one game in like 2 years or something.
Yeah, and
like
that was a bad game. He didn't play well in that game, but it was one game this year, and you can't really judge him on that. Look, I had a coach tell me that after Trevor Lawrence, he loved Trey Lance, all the other guys. So, you're going to get mixed opinions. I liked Trey Lance's tape. I watched 7 games from 2019. He's a twitchy kid. He's a sudden athlete, live arm, moves well. Not Lamar Jackson, but he's one of a kind. But, obviously gives you the design run game, gives you the mobility. At times has a little bit of a windup that I think can be tightened a little. You won't change it totally, but I think it can be tightened up a little. He's an intriguing prospect. Now, common sense tells you that he may not be ready to play week 1, but we never know that anymore. You know how that goes. Yep. We say that about a lot of these guys. Oh, they're not going to be ready, and then they play week 1. And even teams, when they draft guys, Oh, we're definitely not playing him week one. And then of course he plays week one, or we're definitely not playing him his first season. And then week three, he's the starter. So all that stuff doesn't mean anything when they say it. The fact that he didn't play college football this year does mean that, he's going to have to get up to speed with the speed of the NFL. But there's a lot of traits there that you would really like. And again, if you believe in mobility, he has that.
So let's get into the secondary guys a little bit. And I won't ask you for all of them because you've already been gracious with your time. But I did want to start with Kellen Mond from Texas A&M. I'm curious about what you've seen out of him.
Yeah, Kellen Mond is really interesting to me. And I to be honest with you, I haven't done him yet this year. I watched him last summer, like 8 games. So, I watched him in 2019. Now, obviously, my guess is quarterbacks are a little different in some ways because it's not that their traits change. Like, you can watch a running back, from one year to the next, and you're not necessarily going to go, oh, my God, that guy looks totally different. It's like I'm watching a different guy. You normally don't see that. He's going to be polarizing, I think, because he was a big-time recruit. He's a 4-year starter in the SEC. I think that he's really inconsistent as a passer, as I recall. I thought his ball placement was erratic. He's got a delivery that I struggle with, but again, I remember struggling with Phillip Rivers coming out of North Carolina State, as a lot of people did with that funky delivery, and I think he did okay. And I'm not comparing Mond and Rivers. I'm just saying that could be just a personal thing with me. He's got some mobility. I think he'll be polarizing. I think you'll find some teams that really like him, and I think you'll find others that would say he's a 6th-round pick. I think that for those, and there are a lot of these teams, as you well know, who will say 4-year starter in the SEC, I'm going to draft him. Playing high-level competition, week in, week out, lined up and played. I don't believe he missed a start. So I think he's going to have that going for him, whatever that means. Should that supersede your view of his traits and his attributes and his characteristics? To me, no, but I can tell you for a fact that it will for some.
Yeah. He is going to be an interesting guy. The following guys, I'm just going to sort of group, and then you sort of tell me.
And some I may not have seen yet.
Okay.
I've watched about 8 or 9 guys.
Okay. Just guys that you think, hey, when you think of the Patriots, like, hey, I could see them liking this guy or what they've seen. Kyle Trask, Ian Book, Jamie Newman, David Mills, anybody else that's come on your radar who you think Patriots might be.
I've seen all those guys. I've seen all those guys because Newman I did last summer. Newman, I like Newman's tape. I think he can be an NFL starting quarterback. I think he's got good traits. Again, a guy who didn't play this year, I don't know what that means as far as what his 2021 NFL season would be, but I like Jamie Newman. I think he can play. Ian Book, I don't think Ian Book is an overly talented guy. I think he's one of those guys that people will probably like him because, he'll be a tough guy. He'll have all those things we say about a quarterback who's not overly talented. Plus he's 6 feet. He's an instinct quarterback more than a timing rhythm pocket thrower. He looks like a college quarterback. He's got good mobility. He makes a lot of second reaction plays, both throwing and running. Again, that has increasing value. There'll be serious questions, I think, about his ability to execute an NFL passing game with its emphasis on timing and route progressions. I think he's got to develop a better feel in the pocket. He's not a real good thrower of the football. So what that means to a team, that's a hard question.
Yep.
Trask is another one of those guys. He's a little lead-footed. He's 6'5", so he's big. He's probably close to 240. So, at least he has size going for him. He's not a power arm guy. Like, when I watch the SEC, as we all do, because the SEC, is good football, so you watch college games, you'd hear the announcers say, man, he's got a big arm. He's got a good arm, not a big arm. He's not a Carson Palmer thrower. Excuse me. So, And he's a guy, Greg, that quite honestly doesn't have much movement at all. He ran a really well-schemed system at Florida, made the necessary throws within that system. I'm not sure he gets out of much trouble in the NFL. I think he's a little statuesque. I don't want to say his feet are leaden, because that has a really bad connotation, but he is not going to move very well.
And have you seen Mills?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I think Mills should have stayed in school. He's, I think, only started 13 games. He's, for the most part, a pocket quarterback. He's not immobile. He's not a statue. But to me, he would have to make his living as a pocket quarterback. And what I saw, and I watched every one of his games this year at Stanford because I believe he played 5. His ball placement needs to become much more precise as a pocket thrower. His sense of timing and rhythm within the offense he was in at Stanford, which had a lot of pro concepts, needed to be better. So he was a big time recruit coming out of the Atlanta area. I think he might have been the number 1 quarterback in the nation coming out of high school. So there's traits. I would think he would need some work, but he's going to need 3 things to be an NFL quarterback, in my view. He's going to need to be more precise with his ball placement. He's going to have develop a better feel for the timing and rhythm of whatever pass game he's in. And he's going to have to develop movement within the pocket. That's going to be critical. He's going to need those 3 things to become a successful NFL quarterback.
Interesting. Yeah, I had somebody who I trust tell me that, that they really like the depth of this class, that they think that, in the right scheme, with the right coaching, right surrounding cast, and, consistent coaching, that there's a decent amount of starters in this group.
You just nailed it. I mean, and people, I'm not sure people think about that a lot. It's coaching, it's scheme. There's very few transcendent quarterbacks. If you're just looking at pure ability, we know Mahomes. I personally think Josh Allen, and this might be a controversial take, I don't view it as that. I think Josh Allen is the most physically gifted quarterback in the NFL because he's 6'5", 240. Mahomes is not. I think Herbert has high-level traits. But there's not going to be 10 of those guys that come out every year. I'm not sure I would put Trevor Lawrence quite in that category, to be honest with you. I like Trevor Lawrence. I think he's quarterback 1 in this class. But I'm not sure I'd put him quite at that level of traits.
Yeah, without question. Out of that secondary group, is there a name that you think that has a better chance to pop than the others?
Well, I'll tell you a guy I watched and again, when we're talking secondary groups. So I don't want people to think the name I'm going to mention that I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer or a day 1 starter. But I was kind of intrigued with Sam Ellinger from Texas because I watched him. Yeah. And super competitive kid. Again, a little erratic with his ball placement, but he can run a bit. Big body, not tall, but put together. Aggressive mindset and mentality. I'd be curious, and again, it comes back to team, scheme, coaching, where he is in 3 years. He's a guy that I'm going to be very curious about.
Interesting. All right, so we'll wind up on that note. Greg, again, thanks you so much for coming on. I always listen to you no matter where you're on because I always learn something. And thanks so much for coming on the Greg Bedard Patriots podcast. And I look forward to speaking with you again down the road.
That was fun, Greg. I love making this stuff up as I go.
Exactly. Thanks, Greg.